The Taming of Coyote, Chapter 23. The weather was very cool. It was a dark and cloudy day. The wind was picking up, and clamminess was settling over the land. With warm weather came storms. One was coming in. Lorraine flew out the back door and towards the clothesline. The linens were still damp and waving wildly. If it was not saved, it would likely snap free of the line and the clothespins. She worked swiftly to pull down the clothes and sheets. She then stuffed them into her laundry basket. She would just have to finish drying them inside. The windows were pulled shut and latched. Coyote was quick to close the storm shutters as well. The oncoming storm may have escaped Lorraine, but Coyote knew better. And he knew this one was going to come on fast, and it would surely be a doozy. Once preparations had been covered, Coyote and Lorraine began to tend to matters on the inside. The damp laundry was hung about the fireplaces. They'd dry much better this way. "My assumption is that you will not be hunting tonight," Lorraine sighed. "Your assumption would be correct," he chuckled. "My chances of success are slim to none." "I guess we dine upon the vegetarian special tonight," she smiled. "Oh, surely not," he gasped. "Is there no more venison? Not at all?" "Barely. I may be able to stretch it to make stew." "Make it a thick one," he requested. "It's going to be a chilly night, and we may need something to stick to our ribs." Lorraine flopped herself into a chair. "This is terrible." Now, Coyote soothed. "There's no need to get all gloomy. Your cooking isn't that bad." A warning stare made him blush and back off immediately. "We've been through storms many times before. It's just that time of year. It simply means we get to snuggle and be close to one another. Is that so terrible?" "It's not that, Coyote," she replied. "It's Grandpa." "What of him?" "He's all by himself. He won't have anyone to bring him supper. He's such an old man. Despite his pride, he's just having such a hard time doing things for himself." Coyote rubbed the back of his head. He let out a small noise as he made a face. "Well, I suppose we can't deny it any more. It is getting harder for him to get around and do things for himself." One glance at Lorraine, and her intentions were clear. She gave him those big, bright puppy eyes and pouty lips. That face served to melt his willpower. It was even worse on him now than previously. Lorraine had developed a certain radiance, and he was at her command now more than ever. He was powerless against her. "Oh, go on, Lorraine. Ask me." "Would you?" He let out a small whine. "I'll get wet." "He needs a good hot meal, and he needs some company," she insisted. "You're his best friend, Coyote." "Oh, all right." Lorraine went from pouty to cheery instantly. "Oh, you're so wonderful." She gave him a tight hug. "I knew there was a reason I loved you." "Thanks." A loud crash of thunder shattered outside. It caused the both of them to jump with a start. Neither of them feared storms, but sometimes a blast like that was still a surprise. Then the hiss of the relentless rain sounded. Whew! That was one doozy of a storm. Another whine escaped Coyote's throat. In a few hours, he'd have to travel on that. "Now, don't you go stopping off anywhere and dilly-dally," Lorraine said as she packed a meal for the travel. Coyote, now in his animal form, as it was swiftest, sat patiently in the kitchen. "See to it that you get it to him as hot and dry as possible." "Humph!" he snarled. "Have a little faith in me, Lorraine. Have you been listening to that mess outside? I don't even want to go to Avery's house in it, let alone anywhere else." "Oh, stop your whining," she laughed. "Should I wait up for you?" "Do you need me?" he asked. Lorraine waved him off. "I'm still more than capable, but if you're sticking out the storm there, then I shall turn in early. Thunderstorms make me sleepy." I think that's true of creatures all around, Coyote sighed. You stay in here and you stay warm. You need to keep comfortable in your condition. Stop fussing over me, Coyote, Lorraine scolded with a smile. You still have months for that. Right now, you need to go and fuss over Grandpa. Now go already. Don't procrastinate any more. Coyote let out a whine, but he eventually stretched his body and got to his feet. Be thankful that I love you all so much, Lorraine. And with that, he grabbed the wrapped meal parcel, knocked firmly in his teeth, and bolted out into the rain. There was no knock. There was no invitation to enter. The door was forced open as thunder crashed and lightning flashed. In, panting heavily, was a soaking Coyote. He had easily gained 10 pounds of water in his fur, yet looked like a scrawny drowned rat. Coyote? Down went the meal sack, and Coyote shook himself off. He'd still be wet, but at least he'd feel lighter, and likely dry faster by the fire. He then brought the bundle to Avery before making his way to said fire. Oh, warmth and dryness! Lorraine insisted that I keep you fed and entertained. Oh? She's such a good girl, Avery said slowly. In 5 years, age had started to really hit him hard. He gave Coyote a pat on the head, wiped the wet fur that had shed free on his pants, and accepted the gift. Take your other form, old friend. Do sit with me a while. Help yourself to some tea. Coyote did as he was asked. As for helping himself to tea, that required him to actually make it. It was no bother, though. It gave Coyote something to do while Avery struggled to bring food to his mouth. Coyote lowered his head. It was too pathetic to watch. He forced back his emotions and poured the tea once the water had boiled. When he returned to the table, he took hold of Avery's utensils. Avery didn't object, but he seemed to humbly accept his defeat. So Coyote cut the food and fed it to the old man. How sad. Avery was so far gone now. It was such a contrast to the clumsy 14-year-old boy that he had first met. After the meal, Coyote took it upon himself to clean up. For once, Avery didn't argue. Such an absence did not go unnoticed. In fact, Coyote felt a pain in his chest and a sadness in his soul. Human beings, they were so fragile. Coyote, Avery wheezed. That sound made the immortal cringe. What is it? No reply came directly. It worried him. Perhaps Avery was tired and in the process of dozing off. In his old age, he napped often. Coyote took it upon himself to help the old man to his feet and into his bed. As if he had been reduced to a child, Coyote removed his shoes and tucked him in. Still, Avery did not follow through with whatever thought he had started. It wasn't until Coyote turned to leave him that the words finally came. Are you ashamed of me? What a strange thing for you to ask, Coyote replied, as he turned to face him once more. Why would I be? Look at me. I've become so frail, so pathetic. You are a human being, Avery. Human beings grow old and fade away. You are such amazing creatures. Your lives are so short, and yet you are able to make so much of it. You have done well in your life. It's going away, Avery sighed. Coyote stayed silent and lowered his head. The time was drawing near. What good would come of announcing it? None. None would come of it. I am proud to have known you all these years, Avery, Coyote finally said. I am glad to have met you that day. Life is an adventure, and you have lived a long and grand adventure. That is something to be treasured. You were once just a boy named Avery Turn. Now you are a legendary hero. The great Avery Turn, the Coyote Man. Despite his weakness, Avery forced a smile and a small laugh. He was still quite a modest man. What will become of me, Coyote? He replied with a thoughtful smile. You needn't fear your afterlife, Avery. The forces that be will take very good care of you. He gave a little wink. "I'll put in a good word for you." "Even now you make jokes," Avery sighed. "The woodland jester you are. If you are comfortable, then I shall be too. Will you stay with me?" "Of course I will." "Would I be considered a sissy if I asked you to hold my hand?" Coyote lowered his gaze. It hurt. Still, he forced himself to hold himself together. Quietly, he grabbed a chair and he set it beside Avery's bed. Without a word, he sat himself down and took hold of Avery's hand firmly within his own. There he sat, reflecting upon the many years of their friendship. Avery was Coyote's prize and pride. He had put a lot of effort and faith in him. He loved him. Still, he fought back his sorrows and his tears until Avery finally drifted off to sleep with a light snore. It was only then that silent tears fell down Coyote's cheeks. The hours of that night were passed like this. The crackling of the fire and the drum of the rain was all that covered the insane silence. As the time passed midnight and began to dance among the wee hours of the morning, before sunrise, the rain finally came to a tranquil stop. So, too, did Avery's final breaths. It was over now, and he had helped Avery to pass on in peace. There was no pain for the deceased, but Coyote ached through and through. This love that he had developed for the human beings of Turn had created a new wave of feeling and reactions within him that he had never experienced before. The fire died down and soon smoldered into nothing but a trickle of smoke and dying embers. Early birds twittered gratefully outside. The world had been washed clean and was beginning anew. Coyote released the lifeless hand and vacated the house altogether. The sky was indigo and purple, full of clouds with a tinge of orange on the horizon. He changed shape, barely able to cast a shadow. Large paws and long legs carried him along Avery's property and to the top of a great hill. There he could see a large chunk of Turn and all of Avery's property. The pain in Coyote's heart was overwhelming. He had to release it. With one deep breath, he lifted his head to the sky and let out a long, low, sad howl. As if to join in the farewell song and the sorrowful dirge, other sad howls soon lifted and mingled in a perfect, sad harmony until they haunted the woods and village alike. With howls like that, neighboring villages just knew something had become of the beloved Avery Turn, and the Coyotes mourned for him. Mourners circled about the open grave. The coffin had already been lowered into the ground. Now was the time for the final goodbyes before the earth swallowed the deceased forever. Lorraine, of course, attended the funeral. Her faithful husband accompanied her, both of them dressed in the most proper attire to show their respects. Coyote wrapped his arm about his beloved, both their sets of hands upon her belly soon to swell. It would be a pity to know that their child would never know such a wonderful man. Of course, others attended the funeral. People came from far and near to give their final respects to a fallen legend. Every person in Turn was there as well. Avery was Turn. It was all Avery and Coyote. Without Avery, what would they do? Would Coyote lead the village? Would his child, the mixture of blood between Turn and the wilderness of which they gratefully worshipped? Down went the flowers. One fell from every attending hand into the grave and rained upon the coffin. Lorraine bit her bottom lip and closed her eyes. In an instant she turned and buried herself into Coyote's chest. He embraced her sobbing body gently. He could understand her feelings perfectly. Glittering eyes shone from the darkness between the trees. Human beings were not the only mourners to attend this funeral. The trees about this final resting place seemed to droop, to wilt, to bow. Upon their branches sat the hidden fairies of the wood, the pixies, and the other kin of the forest that had watched over this unfolding story for decades. and of course a congregation of coyotes sat among them. No funerals since then, or before then, had ever been so enchantingly grand and simple. Turn, and the world had lost a good man.